I found it funny. I've been working with TV and radio and print media for, basically 25 years. Actually, almost my whole life, I've been talking to the press about one thing or another. And as I get older, I'm almost 60 now. One of the questions I started to get in the last couple of years is people say, well, what's the best life advice, you can give the audience or our viewers or our listeners. And it's kind of funny because all of a sudden, you're supposed to understand life because, you get older. But the number one thing I say, and it's something to consider, is think for yourself. Recognize, if you haven't already, recognize that what we were taught as children in schools, in church, in sports, in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things that we grew up doing, were largely made up by other people, fallible human beings just like us that had, good intent, that were trying to organize and structure our lives and teach us so we succeeded. But it didn't make them right. As a matter of fact, a lot of things they were wrong about. So I promised myself years ago when I started writing books commercially, and becoming an author and speaker and that kind of thing, that whenever I get to the point where I was financially successful enough to do it, I would write the book that I really wanted to write if I no longer needed the support of people on the outside because I was financially independent. And so in 2012, I wrote I promised myself, my promise came true. I delivered the promise to myself. I wrote this book called Sex, Politics, Religion: How Delusional Thinking is Destroying America. And I got a lot of hate mail about it. Did a lot of media about it for about 6 months. And it went all over the world. The book did not sell well. I think it's my best book. I've written 12 books. I think it's my best book. I worked the hardest on this book. It took me 2 years. And basically, I took 50 controversial topics, all the way from, sex, politics, religion, all the things that you're not supposed to talk about in mixed company because it offends people. Because, oh my gosh, if someone else has an opposing opinion about something, I'm so offended I can't hardly stay in the same room with them like I'm 12. It's ridiculous, right? So I've never subscribed to that concept, and I don't really take to that very well. So anyway, I wrote this book and I put all these things in there, and I talk about just some of the things that kind of fall under this idea of thinking for yourself. Because, I think as you do get older, you realize that most of the stuff we follow in life, these are truths. These are the things that this is the thing you're supposed to do, and, and this is right and this is wrong, and morality is something that's handed down from the gods or handed down from the ages. And you realize after a while, most of the stuff is made up. By men, by women, by people trying to organize life, right? But all of a sudden, years later, this is like it's written in stone, And so some of the things like I talk about in this book, and this is not really such a promotion for this book, not a promotion at all for this book. Buy this book, buy this book. It's more about the concept of thinking for yourself. And so in this book, I think I put my 50 opinions, and the first thing the press came out and did, some of the outlets came out and said, well, this is Steve Siebold's idea of critical thinking, and it's his own opinions. Well, yeah, it's my book. Whose opinions would you, expect to read in someone's book? But like marriage, for example, I think I grew up, at least I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up, being taught that marriage is like everything. You go to school, you get a good job, go to college, you get a good job, and then you get married. It's like, well, marriage is one of the biggest failures as an institution that there is. 50% of the people get divorced. A large percentage of people that don't get divorced because they can't financially afford it, and they're miserable. And then, of course, there's a percentage of people that are happy. I happen to be one of those people that's been married for almost 40 years, and I got very lucky because I married the right person, because I got lucky and I met the right person. And we modified a lot of the rules of marriage, and I won't go into that, but now it doesn't matter, just my own thing. But because to make it work for us, and luckily it worked for us. But the marriage is one thing. Going to college is another one, right? You got to go, like in our town in Chicago, a middle-class town in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, everyone, like, you had to go to college. Like, that was, like, there was no option. You just were brainwashed to believe that you should go to college. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because back in those days, college actually was affordable, right? And so I went to college, and most of my friends went to college, and that's fine. But the truth is, college is not for everyone, and it wasn't back then either. you can make a darn good living being an AC guy or a plumber, and some of my friends did that, and a mechanic, and something where you don't get a 4-year degree, but you can make a very good living doing it. Well, they don't, at least in our town, that wasn't promoted. You had to go to school or you were not going to succeed. Well, that's nonsense. I can't even honestly tell you 5 major things I learned in college in 4 years. I mean, I really can't. I mean, I thought it was a fun time. The parties were great. I love the fraternity parties. I mean, that was a blast. I played tennis. It was fun. Had a great time with my roommate, and we had a great time. But and my wife went to school with me as well. We had a great time and all that. But in terms of what I learned, but you had to do it. Well, you had to do it because that's the brainwashing they gave us. And here's another one. You have to have kids. Everyone has kids. Well, first year we got married, my wife, we were walking on the beach in Bradenton, Florida on our first year of being married. And I said, what do you think about starting a family? And my wife said, I don't want to have kids. I know it sounds stupid, but we never talked about it. We just didn't. We were young and dumb. We just didn't talk about it. We just loved each other, fell in love with each other overnight, and we just wanted to be together no matter what. And it's never changed in 40 years. But we didn't talk about all these things that are qualifiers and sometimes can make or break a marriage, like having kids. Well, I'd never heard of some people saying I don't want to purposely have kids. The people I knew that didn't have kids because they couldn't have kids for some physical reason. And so I felt bad for those people. But I didn't know people chose to be childless. Childless by choice is what they call it. Well, I didn't know that existed. No one I knew talked about that. We never had kids, and we've been very happy as a result. I'm not saying you shouldn't have kids or you should have kids. I'm just saying think for yourself because life, I think, is about tailoring it for you. And you and your family, or you yourself, or you and your partner, because it's not wholesale. Everything doesn't work for everyone. And again, that's what I wanted to put in this book. And I'm not saying I have the answers, because I don't have the answers. I guess if I think I have an answer, it's not an answer I came up with. I mean, go back to Aristotle and Socrates if you want. Some of the people who probably originally said it in the modern day world. Think for yourself. Think for yourself. Don't let schools do it. Don't let your parents do it. And when you're an adult, don't let your parents do it. Don't let other people do it. Don't let the church do it. Don't let schools do it. Don't let the government do it. Don't let anyone do it. Don't let them tell you what's right and what's wrong. Obviously, you have to follow laws, or you're going to be in jail, right? But think for yourself. Think about what you think is right. They're no smarter than you and me. It's ridiculous, this concept. It's like, let's talk about drugs. I talk about the war on drugs. It's just a total failure in the United States. I grew up in the Nancy Reagan days when she said, just say no, all drugs are bad and all these things. Well, that turns out, and that's a whole subject for another time, but it turns out that all drugs are not bad. Marijuana, to this day in 2023, is a Schedule I drug, which means it has no medicinal purposes at all, which is patently ridiculous. Of course it has. And that's why it's being legalized all over for cancer patients, for other people, and now it's going to be legalized because of recreational use, which I wrote about in the book, because states need the money, the tax money. It's no different than alcohol. Alcohol's legal, marijuana is not. But it's still a Schedule I drug, which is ridiculous. Why'd they do that? Well, that's a whole other thing that was created years ago to keep a certain part of the population in jail that used marijuana on a regular basis. A whole other form of corruption. And I think that's something else you realize as you get older, is a lot of the world is corrupt. This is not negative thinking. This is reality. This is objective reality. If you put man in a profit situation, a lot of times they will try to abuse it, and that happens every day. And I think anyone that's spent any time in the world knows that, especially if you travel around the world and you see corruption. It's easy to spot it the more you see it. Like anything else, there's so many things. It's religion is another one, which, oh my gosh, we're not supposed to. Religion gets a pass. You can never talk about religion. It's just ridiculous. It drives most people's lives in America. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that, but think for yourself. Does it really make sense to you? I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm asking you, does it make sense to you? Does it logically make sense to you? It's the idea that when people say, well, Christianity is the religion of America. Well, that's not really true. Most people are Christians, but the reason you're a Christian, if you're an American, is because you were born here. And that's what you were indoctrinated with. If you were in India, you'd probably be a Hindu. If you were in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim. If you were in certain parts of India, you'd follow Habadan, the monkey god. Habadan? No, I think I got it wrong. Anyway, the monkey god. My Indian friends know this. We talk about this. There are 4,500 major gods around the world, and the one you believe in, if you do believe in one, is probably most likely 99% because you were born in the country that indoctrinated you with that god. But everyone says their God is the God. It's almost a little bit funny at some point, right? It's based on where you were born and indoctrinated with. And so that's another thing. But of course, you can't talk about religion because religion always gets a pass. That's ridiculous. We need to talk about these things and be adults and not be children and say, oh, because no one can even talk about that. No, when you're talking about something that does not have a lot of evidence or any evidence to back it up, you need to talk about it before you base your entire life on it, or you're not critically thinking. You're not thinking for yourself. I'm not saying you're going to reach the same conclusions I did because I'm no smarter than anyone else, but I'm just saying reach your own conclusions. Live life on your terms, not someone else's. They don't know any more than you do. They don't know any more than I do. And you realize that, I think, as you get older, especially, if you're out there in the world doing business and living and, experiencing things, and you realize that, you probably could have lived a better life, a richer life, if you would have done things your way instead of following all these people that didn't have any better idea of how the world works than you do, or I do. And that's the one thing as I look back on my life as getting older is that I have lived on my own terms. Right or wrong, I've lived on my own terms, and I've really enjoyed the fact, the idea of doing that and being able to live my own way and not by society's rules, except the laws, of course. And you have to fall into line at some level when people agree on certain laws and mores and and different levels of lines of morality and those types of things. But other than that, think for yourself. Think for yourself. If you're interested, pick this book up at Amazon. I think it's a good book. You'll probably get mad at me, or you'll probably disagree with me on a lot of things, and I want you to disagree. As a matter of fact, if you agreed with everything I said in this book, you would frighten me. There doesn't need to be another me out there. There's one is enough. But think for yourself and watch how life can just open up, and you can live the life. You got one time here. You got one shot. As far as I know, you got one shot. Okay, as far as anyone knows, for that matter, you got one shot. Why not take it and live it your way? Go for it.